Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kelly Henderson. Looking forward to our conversation today, Kelly.
Thank you. Me too, Simon.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
So, like many of the guests, Kelly brings both a personal lived experience, expertise to this conversation, and her professional approach. So, you've adopted three kids out of foster care, right? Is that right?
So, so close. We have three sons. Two of our children are adopted out of foster care, and one is a birth child.
Okay. And she's also the exec director of Formed Families Forward, Triple F.
I know that's tricky. We had we known all that alliteration was going to cause trouble down the line. But yes, formed families forward,
Yeah.
uh, and we work exclusively with foster, adoptive, and kinship families. And kinship may be a new term to some, but at least in the States, we use that term to mean an extended family member or close family friend who's raising a child, long term, short term, formally or informally. So there are a lot of kinship caregivers in our culture, and
Yeah.
as of course as well as foster and adoptive
Yeah.
families.
Have you got an idea of what the percentage split is roughly for that?
Yeah, yeah. So we say at least, and I'm in Virginia, the state of Virginia, Northern Virginia, and in Virginia, nearly 15% of children are in homes that are headed by someone who's not a birth parent or step parent. So we will claim in that foster adoptive kinship global umbrella, nearly 15% of children, and a lot of those, a good two-thirds of those are in what we would say are kinship
Right.
caregiver homes. And then about 2% of all children are in adoptive homes, and then the rest are foster
Yeah.
situations or similar.
Yeah. So kinship is bigger, right? So
Lots of kinship. Lots of
lots of
kinship. And a
kinship.
lot of kinship families don't even know that they're they're necessarily a kinship provider. They're just doing what they have done, and that's taking care of family and stepping in as needed. But we do find across all three populations that there are a lot of children and youth and young adults with specialized needs, disabilities, obviously trauma impact, as you know, Simon, from
Yeah.
the adoptive world. And so those children do have significant often needs, and their families have significant need for support. And
Yeah.
that's really where we come in. We're a family-led organization, so we're doing what we do from that family lens. We live it. And we are also professionals in the fields of education and social work and counseling and the like. And so we really use our personal and our professional experiences to support other families from that
Yeah.
peer model.
Yeah. So it's clearly a very a specialist area with some significant differences, some special challenges all around this. What does thriving mean in in your context, in the context of your family, of your organization, of your do you call them members? Would you call them members?
No,
No,
just families, the families
families,
we,
right? Okay,
yeah.
yeah,
So you had done due diligence and had us give some thought to this. So I appreciated that. And I think as I reflected on the term and the concept, I think in our little corner of the world, thriving in uh, particularly when you're raising children with unique and often intensive needs, obviously trauma impact in foster, adoptive, and kinship families, thriving is that persistence, um, to make your way with supports, and it's a you're looking at a piece of the journey every time you are taking a step, and that journey is a very long one, and it's a very winding path. And I think we make our effort to help families thrive within their circumstances is to use that approach of peers sharing resources, being supportive partners as they travel their journey. And so thriving is figuring out the journey's path and who can help you along that, and knowing and recognizing and being okay with the fact that that journey isn't going to have a concrete end. Um, and there's no pot of gold on the end of that rainbow. So I think that realization, um, and the recognition of the importance of others walking alongside you and taking advantage of those resources and knowing that those resources are going to shift continually on that journey. The resources you're going to need, the resources you're going to find helpful, the resources you might not find helpful and you need to pare down. I think that's thriving in our world, is continuing the journey, being persistent on the journey, but recognizing that you're not doing it alone. And
Yeah.
you don't do, you may do best not alone. You may do best with others, and being open to that.
Yeah. I think that persistence. First of all, I love the breadth of the breadth of the description. And the other thing that pops into my head is because if you just said persistence, right, there's not a lot we can say about persistence. It's just dogged
Yeah.
determination. Keep going, keep going, keep going, and and that's all you can say. It's like life. What can you say about persistence than keeping going and not having an option, not seeing an option. Your family is what it is. You just keep on going. You keep on going. Um, and what else can we say about persistence? It's a people ask me, say, well, you're very persistent. I said, yeah. Well, you know, yeah, I just keep at it. I can't really see an alternative. I can't, I, I uh, to it. I try to look at where I can tweak my approach, change my approach, and do some small changes or some big changes, and kind of see what happens. And I'm really realizing I'm giving an awful lot of me into this conversation. But what does persistence mean to you? Have you got a different stake on it, a take on it? Have you got something broader than mine? Because mine seems a little bit limited, really.
No, I think you make a good point. The alternative to persistence is stagnation, right? And we do work with families who are in that space, right? Like that they've tried, and their vision for what this family was gonna their family's journey was gonna look like, um, has not come to fruition, and there's grief and there's loss along that recognition, like my child is not going to be the image of what I thought, um, they could be. And so I think there are folks, that sit in that sort of, this is I resolve to be here. And I would hope that what we do at Form Families Forward, and hope what I do on a day-to-day basis, I try, with my own kids, is to think, yes, and yes, we have these challenges. Yes, we are facing these barriers. Um, yes, we have been turned away from this or that or whatever, didn't go the way we had envisioned. And then we need to find, new ways forward. And so I think, um, it is dogged, and it has also done better with others. And I think that's really where we center our work.
Yeah,
Um, Whether it's a peer support group, or, a parenting class, or a training, or, a consultation to just talk about, this has been my experience, this is where I want to go, and I can't figure out how to go there, or what the next step is. And I think that's where the peer model is very powerful,
yeah,
or can be
can be.
powerful.
So there's an element of kind of creativity, is there, to persistence?
I think so. I think that's a safe statement.
Yeah, and maybe the creativity comes other than solidarity. The peer support provides solidarity, and perhaps that it creates or provides creativity too. So, you know, there's often that relief at realizing, so I think of solidarity, I think of the relief in realizing that it's not just us, we're not going mad, right? Um, so there's a relief there, and then there's a creativity that helps us points us in different directions or see different directions to go to. What does it what does it look like
Yeah, I
for
mean,
you?
yes, I think having options. I mean, we so again, a lot of what we do is in that education realm, what we would call in America special education, exceptional education, um, of children with disabilities. And I think one of the foundational principles of educating kids, all kids, but particularly kids with specialized needs, and parenting kids who may have, is the concept of choice, and the idea that I think empowering ourselves as parents, caregivers, educators, professionals, and empowering our kids with choice is just hugely valuable. That choice may need to be somewhat limited depending on the circumstance, but choice is a really important construct of what we have. So as we work with families, um, and think about that creative approach, for lack of a better term, really being very broad in options. Here's A, here's B, here's C. This is these are the potential outcomes of those options. These are some options you may not have even known exist. And that's, I think, part of our strength, part of our power, to do that again alongside families, and find those out of the typical norm approaches. We're pretty good at being told no and then saying, okay, I hear you. And we're going to pursue this in a different way. And I think sometimes that's done a little easier when you have somebody who's either walked similar
Yeah,
path before you or at least walking beside you.
yeah. What sort of choices do you mean, Kelly?
Oh, so I think, for example, a typical situation that we work with would be a parent, a caregiver, concerned about some school performance. Something happened in school, and the child is not engaging, child is not achieving, child is not getting grades, child is getting in trouble at school, whatever. Um, and they know something about their child. They know a lot about their child. They are the number one expert on their child. Um, and often they are disempowered when they go to the school or the institution, wherever the child, the counseling center, the day camp, whatever it is, wherever the kid is getting services. Um, Often school is what we deal with it, but and they are told they are not. They don't know and they don't understand the way the system works, and so they just need to accept that this is the proposal and this is the plan and this is what's going to be done, essentially to them, to their child, and to their family. And I think we then say, okay, that is obviously one path forward. There may be other paths, and so what are those paths and what are those choices? And trying to clarify what other ways, either that research or experience or policy allows other methods, but always honoring that parent, that caregiver as an expert on their child. And of course, also the youth themselves. If the youth is able to play an advocacy role, it's really important that they have agency in the choices that they're making. And I think sometimes families are so used to being told this is the one way, get on board, or you're just the problem if you're not on board. And sometimes groups like ours that have a very strong set of experiences and have a bit of an understanding of options can help move that thinking a little bit more broadly and help identify new options that they might not know even exist.
Yeah. So it's deep helping parents or caregivers deal with the bureaucracy and the people that want to give a one approach, of seeing it one way, of seeing the way forward as one way, and you're bringing in your creativity bringing in more ways,
More ways.
more ways, and so it's challenging. It's challenging the bureaucracy in there.
Sometimes it is. Yeah, sometimes it is. And sometimes it's a mindset thing. Like I think you deal with this a lot in your podcast with people really thinking about circumstances in a new and different way. And just I mean, if you don't know what you don't know, right? Like that's the that's
Yeah,
the fact of the matter. So if you don't know that the way that you were parented, for example, or the way that you were taught is not the only way or the best way, or the way that's going to work for the kid that you're raising, most importantly, then you can't advocate, you can't support the child, or you can't support the system around the child to change. So I think broadening our lens is really important. And we know that a lot of traditional, for lack of a better term, traditional ways of parenting, traditional ways of teaching, traditional ways of engaging, of disciplining kids don't work well with kids that are in that who have trauma histories, who are in foster adoptive situations, who are impacted by disability or other specialized needs. And so, again, we're just trying to open that door. I think, we talk about things like brain first parenting and trauma informed practices and those kinds of things to just begin to help, again, create options and create choices that to alternatives that are usually not working, right? Like by the time
yeah,
families are coming to us or the family is hitting a wall in the school or in the community, something hasn't worked. The kid is failing, the kid is struggling, there's conflict, there's disciplinary um, consequences. And so where where do we go from here is
yeah,
really where we often start.
yeah. So it's coming. It's about to shift in mindset. Then is it?
I like that. I think so. Yeah, I think a lot of as we work particularly with systems that have been doing their thing the same way for many years, many generations, in fact. I think sometimes it is about shifting mindsets of professionals and often family. Well, you've addressed this, I think, in your podcast about our personal history, the way that we experienced parenting, the way that we were raised, the way that we interacted with schooling and other institutions. That's sort of like our core, our center. And when that begins to not work, when
Yeah,
you're the parent or the caregiver, or the educator or the professional, then we have to be open to that shift. And that's hard.
yeah.
That's hard work.
That's hard work. Um, have you come across the I think she's an American professor. Is she Carol Dweck and this growth
Oh,
mindset? Have you
yes,
come
growth
across that?
mindset. Yep. And a lot of schools are, I think, resonating with some of Carol Dweck's work. Uh, and I think there's some good good content there. I think we always want to start with where the child is and recognize that their history may make a growth mindset easy, or it may make it even more challenging. So, one approach to a growth mindset is not going to fit everybody.
No, no. Um, I read the book and I liked it. I did think it was slightly overlong.
Hmm.
I did think it was slightly overlong. I don't know. What the word that it came down to for me is the nuts of it, uh, listeners, is this word yet, right? So the idea is I can't, and instead of I can't, full stop, it's I can't yet. So
Right.
it's about, well, I think about being when I think of the word mindset, because I often think in metaphors when I'm doing trainings, right? Build in a lot of metaphors, and I think, well, wouldn't it be easier if we were mind fluid? Like you think of mindset, I think of set concrete and being rigid. And what you're talking about is clearly completely different to that. You're talking about a more creative approach. What Carol Dweck is talking about is a more, well, a growth mindset. So it's about change. I'm looking at I'm looking. Kelly's got the Families Forward logo behind her, right? And it's got formed families in quite small letters, and then forward in about four times the size, right? So it's all about forward motion, moving forward, change, shift, mindset shifts in our perspective. What did you learn anything? Um, did you learn anything about your own mindset listening to Carol Dweck talking about growth mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think you raise a really the power of yet is one of the, like, as you say, that she talks a lot about, and the idea that where we are is not our destiny, right? And I think that that's a hugely valuable concept in foster adoptive and kinship world, as well as specialized needs and special education and disabilities and neurodivergence and whatever term you particularly resonate with. I think that is really important. There's always, even in the most significantly challenging situations, there's the potential of something, of change, of growth, of future action. Um, another favorite of ours is Ross Green's work, Dr. Ross Green. And he has this phrase, he does work with parents and caregivers, but a lot of work now in schools, and talks about children doing well if they can. Because traditional, sort of ways of thinking, excuse me, my light's gone. Uh, the power is saving itself. Uh, 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 I think there's a tendency to, when a child doesn't do what we want them to do, we say they're making a choice to misbehave, a choice to be disobedient, or in schools insubordinate, or disrespectful, or um, defiant. Defiant's a
Yeah,
great word schools love. And we sort of assume that child has the capacity to consciously make a choice to do exactly what you don't want them to do. And Ross Green talks about children that pretty much, there's a few, obviously there are moments where children are just being obstinate and persnickety is the word I sometimes use with my kids.
oh,
Um,
that's nice.
uh,
I prefer
but
it to defiant.
yes, um, but on the whole, kids are want to build relationships. They want to succeed. They want to have positive things happen to them, and want to have positive people around them that have positive connections with them. And so this idea of children do well if they can, and if they're not doing what we want them to do, then we need to look at ourselves and say, what is it that we can do to support them in getting closer to being able to do as best as they can in the vision of what we want. And that may be teaching specific skills. It may be teaching coping strategies. You mentioned flexibility, and thinking broadly and widely. I think that's a skill that some children, some adults,
Yeah,
don't necessarily have, inherently, and so that needs to sometimes be taught and reinforced and help. And we talk about the concept of co-regulation a lot, where parents, caregivers, caring adults are supporting that child as they go on that journey towards increasing their regulation and management of their, challenging what behaviors that challenge us and emotions that are challenging to them. So I like that concept. And I guess I don't always hit it, but as I do my work, and I do as a parent, I really try to keep that in mind, that what I'm seeing in this meltdown or this refusal or this statement, or these curse words that are coming at me is not necessarily a conscious evil intent, but an opportunity for us to connect in a different way to move together forward towards some better options. So
yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah. It does. I think I break that section into two bits. That's a bit more bites, a bit more easy for me to chew over, right? You know, this idea of choice, and you know, you mentioned the word trauma a couple of times earlier in the conversation, and I was thinking, right, well, it's not the kid choosing, or the adult choosing. If we extend this to adults as well, it's the trauma that's choosing, and the defiance or persnicketiness, which is clearly a little bit more fun, it or the anger or or the sullenness or whatever it is, it's not the child's conscious choice. It's they're coming from trauma. It's in simple terms. I can't put it any simpler. I don't think it's trauma choosing, not the kid.
And their systems in most cases are doing what they it can and to keep that child safe. And that may be, you know, we talk about the flipped lid. I don't, that's a Dan Siegel model that we use a lot as we talk with families and talk with professionals. But you know, they're protecting themselves from that protective core man, you know, reptilian brain, whatever downstairs brain, whatever term, you know, you resonate with. And so when they're in, then their lid is flipped and they're doing those things that we don't like, that look disrespectful or defiant or whatever. That's their amygdala, their limbic
Yeah.
system protecting themselves, and saying, well, I've got to get out of the situation and the best way I can, and the best way I can is by swearing or throwing something, and that's going to keep me safest. And so, yeah, it's absolutely, you're right, Simon. I mean, it's all driven by trauma, right? Not everything, but a lot of
Well,
what we
it's
see is driven by a trauma response that is again hardwired to keep us safe. So, like, if I'm not regulated or I'm not operating from that prefrontal cortex, then I'm going to react in a way that, I mean, may not look logical to others, but is hardwired to keep me safe.
And when I get around this subject, I can't help thinking about the fact that it's about our ability not to take the kids' trauma-driven behavior personally. That's kind of the whole. That's the secret. We talk about secret sauce,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Before we hit record, right? That to me, having listened to a few people talking about that, that seems to be the thing that makes the difference. And and of course, we can't always see that in the midst of in the midst of the fire, right? In the midst of the disruptive in the heat of the fire, in the storm of the moment, we can't see that. It really does feel it really does feel like it's aimed at us. The missiles that are coming our way. Uh,
Right.
uh, so when I look at this sort of thing, I'm thinking about the insight, right? So we've got to the the thing that's going to change our world for us is the insight that this isn't personal.
Right.
This defiance isn't personal. It is trauma driven behavior. It's got nothing to do with us. It's got nothing to do with the kid. It's got everything to do with their trauma. And yet it's all about our insight, us seeing that more clearly. The more clearly we can see that it's not personal, the less likely they are to take it personally.
Yep. No, I think you're right. And again, we work a lot with schools, so I'm just going to use that lens. In fact, we're doing this. We're talking right now as schools are beginning to prepare for the school year here. And so we're actually doing it in 2 days. We're doing a new teacher training in one of our school systems. Um, and we made a decision that we're we're not going to talk about, you know, pedagogy and specific strategies, but we're going to talk about, you new teacher, um, you likely, first of all, had a decent experience with school. or you wouldn't likely be going into education. Now, there's some exceptions to that, but generally, people who are in schools, teaching, leading, administering, had positive experiences in schools. Like they were successful at some point. Um,
Or else they
you
wouldn't have gone to college, right?
Right,
So they
right,
wouldn't have gone to
right. You
college, you know.
pursued that, and certainly not pursued, um, uh, the education field. Um, so you bring your own set of expectations about what this thing called school is, and so we're actually spending an hour with the new teachers, just really thinking about what is your experience, what are your expectations, and what does it look like when those expectations aren't met, those triggers, those things that you were describing, Simon, when people, you know, they're they're being challenged
Nice
by things
report.
like yes, yes, and really examining that and knowing that the art of addressing really challenging behaviors and challenging student situations is how we're responding to it. It's not changing the kid; it's changing our response to those kids, and that's really hard. And we set up systems that don't necessarily reinforce that too. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I think realizing that again in a situation where you've been very successful with this whole education, and many of us have been successful, children being parented. And so when we use those parenting techniques or those education techniques that worked for us, and are not working for our kids, we get really triggered. And then we start flipping our lid and are working from not our best place. And so there's definitely, whether you call it a mindset shift or something, flexibility is really, really key for the adults in the room.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard stuff. Because
And
we're
the
all
other,
triggered by something. We all have really, really important triggers. And it's sometimes hard to get around those.
yeah. Uh, but the key, the second key thing that you seem to be saying is that it's about our response to their response. It's rather than seeking them to change, we're the ones that are doing the changing, and that requires a hellish big insight, right? Oh well, it's not. I'm thinking now about a therapist that I spoke to a couple of years ago, and she said that essentially she does therapy with young adopted kids. She said parents ring me up. They know the school of thought that I'm coming from, right? Because they've been on a, I think it was a TBRI. You know,
Okay. Yep. Yep. Yep.
so the parents been on a TBRI course of some nature, or knows that this is one way to look at the parenting, and so they know that they know that it's about the changing the parent because that's what TBRI is all about. However, when they ring up the TBRI counselor, therapist, there's about something about fixing my kid
Ah,
comes out loud and strong. So they've got the theory, and yet they haven't had that shift yet that's really been embodied.
yeah.
They haven't seen that clearly enough. On one level, they know it's about changing them, but in practice, they're still thinking it's about changing the penny hasn't dropped yet. They
Yeah.
because they still say to the therapist, "Fix my kid."
Well, and I think that circles back actually to where we started this conversation, Simon, is the importance of walking alongside. Because if you know that you read the book, you've done the workbooks or whatever, you're going to the therapist, the TBR in that case, therapist, and you got to make the change. But if you're not supported in making those changes, it's really, really hard. So that's where I think the peer support groups come in, really loom large as in terms you know, I was on this track. I was going to respond very positively. I was thinking brain first, and then they said this or they did this, and I just flipped my lid. And having others to sort of respond to that and say, "Oh yeah, well, what the one thing that I've tried in that situation is this approach, or we're using picture symbols, and maybe that's a way to do it instead of having the verbal whatever the back and forth was, and just having others who are like, yeah, I've been there. I completely hear you. I've lived that experience in one form or another, and being able to walk alongside. So I think that's, recognizing and then being able to live
Yeah,
that is a whole different thing.
yeah. So clearly, one of the things that stops parents or stops families thriving is a more isolated approach to it. Right? What you bring is that shared the shared experience and the other ideas, the creative solutions. What else do you see? What else do you think that gets in the way of families thriving?
Um, So, I mean, I do think the systems around families can be helpful, and sometimes they contribute to the problems. So, again, schools are a system that we deal with a lot. So if a school is not on board with a different way of thinking about behaviors, so that we talk to a lot of families like, every day I'm getting the call. I can't even look at the caller ID anymore because that triggers me because I know it's another thing that they're calling to say something bad about my kid. So I think, we need to shift that around a whole lot, is the systems around our kids. So that's something else. Um, uh, I think there is still a lot of, I don't know, say blaming, but a lot of even family, within communities, there's sort of some beliefs about bad behaviors come from bad parenting. Um, and that's not that's not helpful, but I think it's a reality. So I think even just within the socials, we talk to a lot of families who are no longer attend their or have had to change their houses of worship because the churches or other places of worship that they had gone to either before children or when the children were younger, and then these behaviors started to become a real, were no longer welcomed or no longer felt welcomed. So I think we still have some systems issues of understanding and not blaming uh, parents and caregivers for their children's behaviors, um, and figuring out a way to be more supportive, um, and maybe changing practices to make that more realistic. Um, I don't know. You ask a good question. I need to think. I'm sure I have more answers than that. But those are definitely, I think, some of the challenges that we hear. There's financial. I mean, there's also always the financial. Particularly, we talked a lot at the beginning about caregivers. A lot of time, kinship caregivers were not ready or planning to take on the care of extended family members, and are financially not necessarily ready to do that. And we, at least in the States, do not have a good system for particularly informal care, kinship care, to support them in any real way. So there's, grandma living in a one-bedroom apartment, and she gets a call saying, if you don't come get these kids, they're going into foster care. She's going to get those kids, but there's not necessarily the supports
Right.
available to do that.
Yeah.
So,
I just wanted we've talked about mindset shifts and seeing things differently, and how the group dynamic helps you do that, helps you be more creative. I'm just wondering, are there any particular moments that come to mind when things have shifted for you, when you've had one of those big, um, well, I guess what they would call in church an epiphany moment, right?
um, personally, you get to the, well, I'll just say, I got to the point where I am engaging in behaviors that I could never have imagined that I would have called when I was a teacher, when I was a classroom teacher, that I would have called if I had heard a child tell me that their parent had done to them, I would have called Child Protective Services because that was such bad parenting, bad parenting. And there I found myself doing that. And so those were, I guess, the points where you're like, something has to change. The way I am approaching this situation is not healthy for anyone. And at the core of good teaching is if you're doing something and it's not working, you got to do something else. And so I guess that those have been my like when I'm like restraining a child because he's punching a hole in the wall, my own child. And the behavior is not that my response to the behavior is not making anything better long term, then we have to be open to thinking of different ways. And those different ways are not what I knew growing up. That's not what I was taught in teacher training. It's not what I understood good parenting to be, but I have to make that change. And finding a few people that are ahead of me on that path was really important.
Yes. Yeah. I did a training last week on the last part of the Thrive framework, which is empowering others. And I was reflecting bef on what empowers us. And I came up with all the nice stuff about empowerment, emotional intelligence, insights, epiphany moments, all these big positive things. And then I was thinking as I was swimming, actually, if I look back on some stuff for me, when I've realized I have to change. So in that last segment, you said I have to change. That has happened. That insight has happened often in crisis.
Yes.
Often
Yes.
it's when things. I was talking about myself, and burying my head in the sand. You have that. You use that idiom and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
saying.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
it's not just a British thing, right? First off, is I wasn't doing that on purpose. It sounds like I was burying my head in the sand. It was trauma choosing or something else choosing. It definitely wasn't Simon choosing. I would nobody would choose to bury the head in the sand, right? We're just being optimistic. Do you know what I mean? Uh, and then the crisis moment comes and the head is ripped out out of the sand and we see that we I see that the way the way forward is different. It's often
Yep.
in those crisis
Yeah.
moments that really and I was thinking about running a small business. I learned more when it wasn't working right.
That's well said. Yep. 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 Yeah. Yeah. There's no motivation like that hitting that wall, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So I heard a while ago we're motivated either away from pain or towards pleasure. That is what human motivation it is all about. And the pain, the thing about pain is it's present now, but being motivated towards pleasure, towards some further moment, I that's not there. It's the pain is present. The pleasure is just in our imaginations about the future. So it's the pain that motivates us towards change. So to what extent do you see that within your your families?
well, I would say, I mean, I'm not sure I would pain's a strong word, but I think um uh the discomfort, the experiences of challenging circumstances all of our staff, all of our board have, at our organization, they've been in those places where things, haven't gone as desired. Um, and, and, and then that pain, that disconnect, that dissonance with the way it should be has, um, and I would say this about, we're part of a parent center network of training centers in every state that support parents of children with disabilities, not necessarily foster, adoptive, kinship, but all families of children with disabilities who are receiving special ed. I mean, I'd say across the board, that's how the staff, that's how staff do their job, is from that place of, we've been there and things, we saw it not work. And we know there are strategies, either through information sharing or practice or a connection, relationships, or changing policies, and procedures and best practices that can make it less painful,
Yeah.
to use your term. And that's what then fuels what we do, our work with families, because it doesn't have to, you don't have to sit in that misery. Again, circling back to where we started, the idea of persistence, like the alternative of persistence is stagnation. And some people are there. And I would say generally our staff and board are not people that are comfortable with that stagnation. And so we were using those experiences of the need to persist and the strategies we use to persist, and using that peer model to really help other families and say, it doesn't have to be this crappy.
Yeah.
um, and let's figure out. And did you know that you could request this? And did you know you could blah, blah, blah. And here's a resource directory of trauma-informed providers who get it and aren't going to just say, oh yeah, your parenting sucks. Like that there are better ways. There's not a perfect way. That's one thing people learned. There's not one perfect way, but
Yeah.
there are better ways, or more constructive ways, more flexible ways,
Yeah.
that benefit the family, benefit the kid, and benefit the institutions around them.
And we always we want to learn from somebody that has come through the mire, come through the manure, right?
Yeah.
And kind of coming out of the other side, or has come out of the other side. And that's how we change. And the the strange kind of parallel that's popping into my head now is some of the adoptee Facebook groups where everybody is in the mire, and we unfortunately we are stagnating. We're stagnating in that place. um,
Not healthy.
Not healthy. And yeah, kind of, there must be some reassurance on it. We're being proved right, aren't we? I think are we being proved right? Um, nobody's pointing out the error of our ways. There must be something. There must be something that we're getting from that in
Well,
some kind
yeah,
of strange way. It is a strange analogy, but I, I, often, what do I need to do to a broadcaster? Somebody says, "Well, find somebody that's been through what you've been through, come in at the side and ask them about how they did it." It's not it's not that
well, and
hard. And
yeah,
yeah,
this isn't my specialty, but I think that there is some value in just being in that space of complaining to get like being in that place of shared frustration, shared, like, and this, I mean, in my relationship with my husband, sometimes I just want to complain. I just want to complain about whatever the situation was and just have him go, uh-huh, 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 not necessarily solve it. Like, I want to be in that space of just dumping, venting. I want you to empathize with my frustration, my level of whatever. And then there's a place for, okay, now what are we going to do about it? But and so maybe there's just those maybe
Yeah, maybe
I don't
there's a
know, but
step.
you know,
Yeah,
like it starts with that, like just everybody's like in the mire together, and we're gonna like
yeah,
hear each other, and maybe then we're going to be able to
yeah.
take a step in. And maybe some people are not wanting to take that step. I mean, I don't know. I again, not my,
I would
but
say that we're back to the choosing again thing.
yeah,
I would say that trauma's choosing. I would say that trauma's choosing, and we're not. And you talked about uh, judgment earlier on. You know, like I'm thinking, how much does our self-judgment, our self-criticism, how much does that keep us stuck or keep us spinning the wheels, right?
yeah.
Before before they catch, you know, before we get out of the gravel and the tires are on back on
I love
the
that
top.
analogy. That's going to be
Uh,
my next analogy,
is
Simon.
it? Okay, cool.
The tires in the
The
gravel. I
tires,
love it.
yeah, yeah. So, Kelly, we're kind of coming up on time here. Is there anything that you'd like to share that I've not asked you about?
I guess it's just, uh, you know, if people are listening to this and are raising children or supporting children who have disabilities or neurodivergence or other specialized needs, I guess, you know, in terms of that acceptance and realizing the rate of those conditions of disability and other learning and behavioral and social impact is really high amongst foster, adoptive, and kinship. I mean, we theorize why that is, but the reality is we know at least 3 to 4 times the rate of disability, identified disability, um, amongst our families. And so I just want to like be really clear, like if that's your reality, you're not imagining it. And if you suspect that there's a reading or learning or behavioral challenge or mental health condition under in addition to the foster, the adoptive, the kinship situation, you know, just trust your instinct and, you know, reach out. If you're in the States,
Yeah,
reach out to a parent center, um, reach out to others who have lived, you know, are working within the systems and be persistent. You are the ones who know your child best. So, you know, don't shy away from, you know, asserting yourself to get the services and supports, reaching out to others who've lived similar circumstances or know the disability or other service systems, and because the sooner kids get supports, the better they're going to fare. So that's indisputable. So that would be my little commercial.
thank you, Kelly. Thank you. And thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.